Hey, how's everybody doing? My name is Tomlins Nyback. This is 365 Days Towards Racial Change. We're here talking about Black issues, the Black position and orientation in America, and I don't know, ways and means to resist racism, resist ancestral curses about slavery and things like that. I usually start out, first few minutes, kind of getting things off my chest, venting. This is very cathartic. I recommend this exercise to anyone with some mental anguish. Make your video talk back to yourself, do your own self therapy. I'm going to dispense with that today because I wanted to we got a lot of material, and I want to do this in one sitting, kind of get some good context under our belt. So I'm not going to talk much, but we're just going to dispense with my rants and raves and praises and get to the material today. We're here. I'm inspired. Back in 2018, I was inspired by a man named Dr. Claude Anderson. He's still doing his stuff. He's right here on the YouTube, and he's very active. He can talk and articulate these issues much better than I can. I've read 3 of his works. A Black History Reader, 101 Questions You Never Thought to Ask. Black Labor, White Wealth, Search for Power and Economic Justice. And Dr. Anderson's National Plan to Empower Black America, PowerNomics. You can find Dr. Anderson here and at PowerNomics.com. You can get those resources. He's written other books, a lot of lectures. Listen to what he's got to say. Behind me, you see the hashtag #ST symbol. You'll find Black women coming together, having their community support one another. Check out Black Enough, BLAGGENUF, kind of a Black Facebook experience. And if you got a business mind, go holler at Dr. Boyce Watkins at the Black Business School, theblackbusinesschool.com. If you can't find your flavor on the internet with all the groups for and against, pros and cons, then do what I did. Start your own. Get your little grassroots going and just see where it goes. You just obey your consciousness. That just may be what the universe is waiting for to make you the next success. And for some fictional talking points informed by real events, you can check out a book called Uncle Tom's Cabin. We just had wrapped up a big series in there. We may get back to that later on. Today, I wanted to talk about you ever wonder why there seems to be a fixed distance between white power, privilege, and whatnot, and Black marginalization, disenfranchisement, a disadvantage, socially and economically? Yeah, it seems like the better the white people get, well, Black people do move along a little bit, but never, Black people are never eye to eye and competing on the same level, so to speak, right? And not only that, you think about growth, economic prosperity. Like here, say this is the white folks, here's the Black folks, and it's not a true linear movement where the distance remains the same. That's almost tolerable, right? But it's more like as things move whites just kind of have this acceleration going on, and blacks see this kind of slower growth, right? Whites have an exponential growth, and blacks, oh, you just kind of creep along. That's my view of it, my personal view and experience of it. It is that way. Part of it's that way. What we're going to talk about today. It's page 13 of PowerNomics from Claude Anderson about monopoly building, and he in this section he breaks down three phases of monopoly building. Um, all three phases leave black people at a disadvantaged and challenged state. The first phase of the monopoly building, and this is good because this is the international almost paradigm that almost puts white folks in the position that they're in. And that is, uh, if you remember way back, occasionally I'll talk about value systems, indigenous people versus white people, Europeans with their idea of conquest and ownership, right? I was listening, I do meditation and prayer in the morning, things like that, and I like a little um, music for atmosphere. And so now I've got this, I stumbled onto some Native American music with rain and stuff, right? And they're blowing their flutes and they're doing Native American flutes and things like that. And see, when white people from Europe came on their ships looking for resources and things like that, because of wars and the depletion of their economies and things like that, they were looking for some new resources. But the Native Americans and the Africans, in general, they have conflicts and progress and stuff, but not like the Europeans. They are aggressive, right, with maximizing the benefits and resources and gathering of a space, right? They're going to mine out of that resource when they find it, and just leave a hulking shell in their wake. So they come over. I'm going to tie this up in a second. The Europeans come over to America and they find people sitting around playing flutes, dancing to the sun, and all this stuff. Go to Africa, and it's very natural cultures. And they just, you know, are like, they just can't take it. They have to have the land, the people, the resources, and stuff. So that is how, essentially, like the first franchise got underway. And with that, let's unpack that first phase, monopolization, a little more. Dr. Anderson has it as the colonization phase, and it wasn't as simple as Columbus discovering this or whoever discovered America. Who cares? A lot of debate on who was first and who came and stuff like that. But it was when the colonies were established, they were still beholden to England or whatever country supported them. You had Spain, had a little piece of Florida in the south. The French went north, essentially, and whatnot. England, um, uh, had control of the colonies, and with that, you had all, um, all the commerce, any engagement with resources and things like that had to go to England. They were gathered from England. I mean, from the colonies, were shipped to England, and the colonies had to buy those products back from England after they were manufactured or refined and stuff like that. So, you had a big, you had this great way of commerce going, but you had England got its little grubby hands and everything. And of course, that's before the Revolutionary War, which is a big part of that, because, I mean, do you like paying taxes or anything like that? I'm very sensitive when somebody is, boy, they got to have a piece of my um, economic discourse. Like, there was a time when I write you a check, you take that check to my bank, and the bank gives you what I wrote that check for. Well, now the bank is like, they want to charge $1, and they want to get a little 50 cent off of, the check that I wrote to you. Well, that's what England was doing. They were just in everything, and that would drive me crazy. I'd go to Revolutionary War over that as well. The process was called the Navigation Act, or acts. The idea, you had the Navigation Act, Stamp Act, where England had to, forgive the word, but jism on everything, put its mark, kind of a prima nocta in the marriage bed, had to put its stamp on things, and then you got to use the product, service, or resource, right? Um, they they did not like this, but this monopolization subject um, is the model. If you look at it today, right, and you want to, I don't know, if you're a car manufacturer, then you have interest in gas. You have interest in mining raw materials. You have interest in, of course, marketing, sales, things like that. But you want to, from beginning to the end, you want a piece of that. That's the monopoly going on. Um, so England is in place 100 years after colonization gets on, right? And the colonies, they cast that off. Boston Tea Parties and things like that. They want to, get off, you know, shake off this monopolization, uh, being like a kind of leech. We want to be our own. And fortunately, an ocean separated them at the time, or the world would be so much different if speed, if the land mass was contiguous, or if there was more speed in troop movement and communication, things like that. We'd care about what's going on with the crown and England and stuff. Fortunately, an ocean separated us, so as a country, we fared well. Problem is, when the colonies did rebel, they took the monopolization model and enforced it on black people. Um, so our second phase of monopoly building, right, we got the model now. England is the model, and as rapistic and um, unfair as it was, we still turn around and say, maybe we should get down and dirty and do the same thing, which is what the white colonists did. So if you look at James Madison's notes on the Constitution and some of the deliberations at these conventions and stuff, you'll see, yeah, black people were a subject, right? But they weren't ever going to be participants in this. White people now were the monopoly. They cast off English control. Now they could be their monopoly and enforce the same um, pressure on its disadvantaged citizens, the black people. So they boomeranged it and came right back at us with the same kind of agenda that the crown had towards the colonies. Um, with this, establishing slavery, right? I mean, England, like at least you could push back, talk back a little bit. The colonies had that black resource that they could whip, beat, torture, rape, and tear up families and stuff. They did this with impunity. There was no pushback, legal recourse. Nobody was looking out for black people in the land. So the South really loved it. North was like, okay, we're building a nation, whatever. While the North may have tended to be free, remember all colony, the whole space was slavery. It was just the North that wasn't feeling it, probably because of geographics, weather, and things, volume and size of crops versus the South. I think a lot of that would have to do with it. But the South loved it. They sit back, watch all these black people doing all the work. They just sit back and watch it roll in. Well, this caused the second phase of monopolization caused some extreme tension between the North and South because the South got political and economic power from this free labor from black folks that white people were not using. Right, that the up north it was more. They were more mechanistic. They were industrializing, using more machines. Where and they had to pay labor and be fair up north, where the South had free, compliant black labor pumping out all of this cotton and other crops. War, another war. Pay attention to that, right? When things get at an impasse, you're going to have war, and it's not just different ideas, but somebody's got to give. Therefore, we got to fight that war. 1861 Civil War over wealth and power. I just saw. I was watching one of my favorite shows, West Wing, some reruns. It was on way back. And somebody says, "Oh yeah, Lincoln freed the slaves and all this stuff." Well, Lincoln, like, it freed the slaves, but don't think that Lincoln and the North had all this altruistic, benevolent designs on black people. Freeing the slaves was breaking economic and political power of the South. It had nothing to do with uh, wanting black people all up next to you and stuff. That's not why the slaves were free. The slaves were free so that it could assuage, water down political economic power of the South. Uh, but that's what I was taught, right? In school it looks like, oh, good, there was a war to free the slaves. And I'm thinking how fair America is on the issue of black people and stuff. Well, golly gee, right? And my young mind doesn't put together that, even after a war and freedom, that there's still civil rights movements and history is maintaining um, this issue with black competition and participation in America's socioeconomic landscape. I'm not putting it together. I mean, it took me 50 years to put it together. Like we keep having these conflicts because it doesn't exist in the land properly or as um, it appears in history and our founding fathers and things like that. All that language, altruism, and stuff like that, that's for white people, white Europeans, not disadvantaged black folks. I mean, technically, yes, but in practice, no. You get that? Um, so you get another war in this second phase of monopolization. And pay attention, war. When there's a problem, things are at impasse, is war, right? You know, we had 9/11, and we went to war after that, and it looks like, boy, we are going to get bad guys and stuff. But unfortunately, America told its own citizens lies and stuff. It should have just said, look, we got to go over there because this space is harboring terrorists. That's why we're going. And but instead they went into propaganda mode and all this stuff. Instead of just being honest about why we are liberating Iraq and things like that. You know, it's because of oil interest. Yeah, we're rooting out bad guys and trying to uh, slow down um, an environment that's nurturing terrorists. But there's other real motives that they should have just told the American people the truth. We can handle that. And what I think we would have been just as supportive without being lied to. But that's the same thing about slavery, right? Um, Even in Harriet Book's Uncle Tom's Cabin, you get the idea that there's effort and some compassion for the lives of black people, but that's not the, the full reason of why there would be war over this and to free the disadvantaged group. You know, it's to break the political power, economic power of the power group that's manipulating the disadvantaged group is the real reason for war. That's that second phase of monopolization. The third phase was of monopolization, and all these phases is the monopolization to where white people stay in a comfortable position of power, control, privilege, and all that in general, right? You got plenty of people all over the map, but in general, you can look at society and you're not blown away just by so many white people doing well, black people not doing well. Something that I've looked at all my life. Um, Third phase is after the Civil War. Right? Civil War. Blacks are freed, so on paper, the South does not no longer has free labor, political power, economic power, stuff like that. They got to start paying wages and things like that, but not so fast. The North was in favor of exporting blacks to Africa. We have Liberia. England had its own space on West Africa, Sierra Leone. They say, okay, we're done, you know, trying to deal with you black people, so let's ship you to Africa because Africa is the black place. Other places are white spaces, and it's so sad that mankind chose skin color to make these judgments. That's the poorest line on which to discriminate, because it doesn't tell you nothing about a person's intellect, ability, morality. It doesn't. You can't look at a person's skin color and tell that, right? Work ethic. What are you talking about? That's skin color does not tell you that at all. It's the worst possible way to judge and discriminate against a person on the earth is to look at skin color. But we went there, and now the world's all twisted behind that. Anyway, so the North was for exporting black people. It ignored the black people. Yeah, later on we'd have a military force to help with voting rights and civil rights, integrating schools and things like that. Uh, but essentially, like the North did not promote this incredible atmosphere. Right? There was the nation had just had a war, internal war, where it was the highest mortality or the highest casualty rate of any war that America's been involved with was our Civil War. And so there was healing from that had to go on. So the North, they just had to break the power, and everything else would come along of itself in time through a whole lot more bloodshed, oppression, discrimination, things like that. The South was devastated, needed to rebuild, and it the South had to keep a monopoly on black labor. So the monopolization as far as being black and disadvantaged continued, just in another form. Now, for down the South, it was the Jim Crowism, separate water fountains where you could live and stuff like that. There are curfews in certain towns where if you're black, you can come there to work, but after sundown, you better be on your way out because if you get caught in town, you're at the mercy of racism. Here's a quote from some notes from Senate proceedings. Right, everybody's keeping notes on that stuff of that time. He says, someone stated that the southern states, by their situation and climate, require black labor and must have it, or the states will cease to have any value. Right? And so there's the black people being used up. And it's not like black people are represented when that kind of conversation is happening. It's, this is happening off in some closed room, and blacks just suddenly have to work harder, or we got mass incarceration. You look at Angola prison down in Louisiana, right? The black person could be locked up for some made-up charges and sentenced to work, build a road, dig a ditch. The idea is just this is how we steal the labor by making up uh, some law to violate you, and then we could throw you in prison. Part of the amendment, they made servitude illegal, and they said except, says something to the effect of except in relation as punishment for breaking the law. That's an extreme paraphrase. It says, yeah, you got free men, all women are free, but people who break the law, we can incarcerate and steal their labor again, is generally how uh, some of the amendments read. Um, and finally, these monopolies, this is an important thing about today, especially regarding black folk, because these monopolies get passed on generation to generation. Right, the white community, the power structure passes on its leadership, managerial skills, and all that to the next generation. It keeps going. Black people inherit more work, uh, poor wages, and stuff like that. Right? We've got all these statistics. But there's more jobs in America than ever. But you see, wages ain't going anywhere, and you got to work 2 and 3 of these more jobs just to make your ends meet. You get no life, and so that's the sad part. So these monopolies, we're to keep that in mind, keep our eyes open, and when you feel economics tugging on you and your pocketbook and your labor, you're you want to be sensitive to that. You're right in your assumptions. I'm Tomlin's Nyback. That's 365 days towards racial change. Day 301 out of the way. Thanks for spending time with us today.